first is with regards to the true MidPacific well site up in the Waikele Puna Forest Reserve. Questions were asked, how safe is that well site if the eruption was to go near it? Dr. Jim was able to get us a copy of the closeout report for that well site. And in review of the report, they had no less than 14 concrete plugs inserted into the well and capped that well site. So it is sealed and safe and should not pose any problems with the eruption should it go near or approach that particular well site. The other thing is with regards to the smoke conditions that you folks may have experienced over the weekend, in particular on Saturday, was extremely heavy. There wasn't any increased burning activity. The unfortunate thing is we had a southerly wind component on Saturday that was bringing the smoke from both Halimamau, Pu'o'o, as well as whatever was burning just adjacent to the eruption site, along with a significant inversion that morning. The temperature inversion was keeping all of the smoke down to the ground. When we took off that morning to do the helicopter overflight, it was very obvious that the smoke was being held down to the ground, and it was blanketing the entire Puna district. Once the inversion broke as the day heated up and the winds picked up, it dissipated. And again, we haven't seen any significant brush fire or wildfire activity at the flow itself. Only what's burning is what's touching the lava itself, nothing else, so there is no brush fire threat. And we've asked the Weather Service, we did confirm that morning that it was an inversion. I've asked them to give us more forecast updates if that could be expected. If they see that potentially happening, let us know so we can let you know ahead of time what to expect the next day.
You mentioned that if the flow continues its current course in the next 1 to 2 days, you'd be issuing a warning. Could you please state for all of us what exactly that means and what the different levels are? Wait, and then before I lose my train of thought, I'm also curious to know about our transmission lines and where is the main power source for our area, and if there is a contingency plan worked out with Helco so we don't endure up to 10 days without power, or if we can expect that, if you could spell that for us. And then my other question is, in last week's meeting we had a talk and you mentioned that the flow may, like we're looking at it, and just like the gentleman before me, he suggested that it may be heading toward Leilani Estates, but I was under the impression, and again, I understand your role is to not project too far ahead and create fear, but can we plan ahead here? You mentioned that it was going to maybe divert north just by looking at the topography. So if you could explain that to us without creating fear and doomsday.
I'll
Thank
answer
you.
the first and the last.
Okay.
The USGS operates 5 volcano observatories in the U.S. So we monitor the Marianas, the Aleutian Islands, the Cascade volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest, and then those all the way through California. And so we operate a standard alert level code for volcanic states of all 100 some odd volcanoes that we monitor. Right now, Kilauea is at the 3rd highest level, which means that it's erupting, that it's posing local threats around vent areas, but it's not really threatening any infrastructure, homes or such. But in this case, we have a lava flow that's moving towards a residential area, and so that requires us to go to the 4th level, which is a warning. Right now we're at watch, I think it's called, whatever the 3rd level is. And so we're going to move it up to warning just for the Kaohe Homesteads area. And that's really all it is, but it's something that both Daryl and I have talked about as sort of initiating various response things, both for us and for the county. Let's see, and then the last question is about the path, yes. So this has been hopefully a constant message I've been providing through these meetings, is that it's clearly, the lava flow is clearly confined within the rift zone structures, the cracks and the broken blocks and everything is just going right along the rift zone. If somehow it should be able to escape that structure, the general trend of the topography would pull flows to the northeast. But clearly so far it hasn't northeast that way. So, but clearly the flow has not diverted from these rift zone structures, and it keeps going in a fairly narrow path through families of cracks. It's been coming up a crack and going down adjacent cracks, and it's in a crack now. So.
I know you had a second question, Tiffany, as regards Helical Infrastructure. Yes, we've been working with Helical as well as with some of the scientists in the community to have ideas on how to protect Helical's infrastructure. So we got the two of them connected. They're going to be looking at those strategies and mitigation efforts on how they can protect the infrastructure should the flow approach utility poles, et cetera. As far as whether or not it could create isolation or power disruption, definitely. As you folks all experienced with the storm, it doesn't take much to disrupt the power distribution. There's actually two main distribution lines that come out from PGV and are connected there and come through the community. It would just need to take out one of those to create a substantial interruption in power and then have power outages over a large portion of the community. But we are trying to see how they can protect their infrastructure and have contingency plans should power be interrupted. How are they going to maybe redistribute or reestablish that as well? And I'd like to add to your first question a little bit. As Dr. Jim said, they're going to be looking at elevating their threat level in the next day or two. We had discussion today where we're going to be doing the same. And it's not that it's posing an imminent threat. It's we just need to raise the level of concern, again, because it is continuing to move. There is no indication that it's going to stop. And we're very appreciative that, especially I want to reach out to the Kohe subdivision. The residents there have done a tremendous job in preparing and planning for this over the last 2 weeks as we started to talk about it. Many of them are relocating livestock. Many of them are packing up their belongings. It's a very frustrating, it's going to continue to be very honest. It could continue to be a very frustrating experience for all of you. Because when we say that it could be coming this way, it could stall, it could stop, it could even basically go in a whole another direction. But I will be asking you to have your plan in place and be prepared for an evacuation. And that's going to be very frustrating for many of you. But I think together we'll keep you informed. We are doing daily flights every single morning to make sure we maintain close observations of any change. I share whatever we see with Dr. Jim so that he can, if he needs to get up, or he can interpret what we see as far as observations and then guide our decision making. But I will not, I guess, avoid or in any way evade that. It's going to be frustrating for a lot of people here every day waiting it out and seeing when is it really going to do something that's telling us it is posing a threat, or is it going to go in a whole different direction. But we are going to be working together on taking the next step, which is raising that threat level. And that will result in some actions being taken as far as the coordination of the resources for those alternate access routes.
So is it officially raised?
Not yet. We'll probably be doing that over the next 2 days.
I had a question. It seemed like for 30 years it went south. And now it's going northeast. And so as somebody who just recently retired here, thinking another 30 years, I'm thinking, well, this particular flow could stop, could go to the ocean, whatever, but is there a reason to think that we're permanently on a northeast heading now for flows?
Permanently is a hard word. Over the last 2 years, flows have been predominantly in this area. But you're right, prior to that, most of the flows went south into the ocean eventually. And the reason these flows over the last 2 years have been in this area is because the Pahoa vent appears to be getting weaker. It is failing on that side of its cone. So most of the Kaholea flows of the last 2 years were actually overtopping the rim on the northeast side. This set of flows came out sort of mid-flank on Pahoa. In prior years, before the last 2 years, the flank actually failed on the other side. On the south side, on the west side, flows went out there and they ended up going into the ocean. So it's going to be hard to say how Pahoa is going to fail next.
So it could really fail any direction?
I'm not sure about that. It seems to like to stay in one sector for a while. And this has been a couple of years now on this side.
Thank you.
We just watch and learn.
I have a number of questions for Daryl. So let's say that it's kept going in exactly the same position that it is, and it crossed 130 and 132. So would you evacuate everyone below that? Would you evacuate everyone below Pahoa? And how many thousands of people are we talking about?
Well, every one of these subdivisions, I'll use Leilani, and again, not to jinx anyone or identify a target, but you're looking at well over 1,500 people in Leilani Estates just as one subdivision. And as you mentioned, the Puna district is the fastest growing community in the state. So it would depend. If it went on that same track, we've already identified alternate routes using the shoreline, the beach road. So an evacuation, again, if you haven't been here before, you might not have seen where a lava flow and eruption may not encourage everyone to leave. Some people may choose to stay, even though critical infrastructure could be lost, such as power and roadways. But for those that would want to continue and have access, we are establishing and trying to improve what access currently exists, like Beach Road, so people could come and go. As well as for those that would be leaving, we're working with you as if you need temporary shelter and then the transition from there. So it's very difficult, as Dr. Jim has said, for us to say with any certainty where it would cross the highway, what would be cut off, how many people that would affect, and if it continued all the way down to the coastline, what other alternate strategies as far as access. As we mentioned in probably the first meeting we had, even the discussion of reestablishing the Chain of Creators Road, even though it would add a huge amount of commute for everyone, it would provide access. And it's not just access for people to leave, it's also access for services and resources to come in. For those that would stay, we need to make sure we can provide medical services, emergency services to those who would choose to reside in the community, as well as how do you get your commodities. So it just depends on where it crosses the highway, and we're looking at creating more than one alternate access route in these areas as it continues to move.
And what kind of a buffer zone do you evacuate? I live in Nanavali, at the very north end of Nanavali, and we used to, when we rented out our place, we talk about the hot pond and warm pond and Waiupai and stuff, and now it's like, are we going to have a front porch seat for the lava? Or, do you evacuate people on a half a mile either side, quarter mile either side? What do you do?
It also depends on what other secondary hazards we're seeing with the flow as it advances. You could have, although right now it's raining, nice and wet outside, if it was to get dry and the vegetation, we could have wildfire problems that pose a secondary hazard. Just because the vegetation is wet doesn't mean it won't burn. As I mentioned, it's burning on the leading edge. Smoke conditions can get fairly heavy quickly. Those who have maybe existing health problems, respiratory problems, just the added smoke and irritation in the air can exacerbate or make their conditions worse. So that would be another reason for considering an evacuation buffer or distance. The other thing is we do experience methane explosions with eruptions, just with the normal decomposition of vegetation, what's subsurface, as well as, unfortunately, we're going to encounter a situation if it enters any residential community, other hazardous materials that might be just present in the community. You could have residential propane tanks. You could have stored combustibles. These things might require us to consider a larger buffer area as it's moving along.
I live in Leilani, and I'm trying to be proactive about what I might have to do. And so I took it upon myself to contact a container company that has a yard in Keau, and I have various options that I can exercise regarding the type of container that I might get and whether or not that container will be on a trailer or whether it's on a ground. But one of the things I'm concerned about is if there is a massive subdivision exit, it seems to me that I don't know whether it's civil service or what, ought to be very proactive about making sure that there are a significant inventory of containers available to people if they need them.
And I applaud you for what you're trying to do is identify what options you have now, so when the time comes, you're better prepared. And if we move into that level of heightened threat, heightened, alert, state of alert, more forward we move with that, it opens the door for access to assistance from the state, such as the National Guard. But again, I truly appreciate what you're doing in advance, so we're not waiting to that last minute point where it's a crisis or an emergent mode, but rather doing it now when it's easier and identifying what resources are there.
As the evacuations start taking place, that people get very tense and they're dealing with a lot of different things and they're very emotional. And I'm telling you right now that if these people that are emotional, that are trying to evacuate, are driving to KL to get boxes, gasoline, whatever they need, they're going to be very, very frustrated. The situation in KL right now is unbelievable. I cannot believe that our government has made us spend thousands and thousands of gallons of gas, time, money, everything sitting in that traffic. And I don't believe that Glover couldn't do a better job managing that traffic. And I'm telling you right now that if this neighborhood, every single person in here has to evacuate, they are not going to sit in that KL traffic. That's not fair. And we don't want to sit in the bypass traffic either. We want a straight line to Hilo. We don't want to sit there in that traffic. We don't want to wait. We want containers, we want trucks, we want everything we need here when we need it, and we're not waiting in that traffic. I swear to God, you will have an uprising on your hands if we can't get the things that we need. Right now, I have to spend an hour and a half almost to get to Hilo to buy a gas can to put extra gas on my property on Pawiki Road so that I can stay down when the eruption comes.
800 feet per day, what is at that rate, if it doesn't change, what is the impact time for Ka'o'e or
If it
that general
continues-
area?
If it continues at that rate, it'll be about a week.
About a week.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The road, nobody's mentioned the lower, the road that comes across 7 miles, can we open that? The old Chandler Road, is that like not an option?
No, we actually are looking at it. I have already gotten a price estimate from our state highways, as well as we're working with National Park on what permits or processes we'd have to go through. So we are looking at that as another option for access.
What is the price estimate on that?
I'd hate to throw it out there without DOT's
Well,
approval.
let's do that.
It's multiple millions, let's put it that way.
What are we thinking about here? It's land, sea, or air? We got water capabilities, we flying in, we opening an airport down in Lower Puna. Obviously, we're gonna get cut off here. I mean, and the reality of it is, we are. And there has to be a contingency plan for that, 130 looks like a great airport to me. We just clear a couple trees out, man, we can drop some C-130s in there, MREs, I love them. We can get water buffaloes, we need some generators, we need to power up. These people need to live down there, brother. This is how it works. I think that's really where we need to that's the contingency plan that I think really needs to happen, is the military needs to step in here and say, look, we got so many D-10s on this island. It's incredible. Let's open the road.